and gentlemen, good morning and welcome on in to another episode, the Thursday episode of Fantasy Daily. It is August 4th. I, as always, am your host, Nathan Passwell, flying again solo this morning. John is off. He will be back tomorrow for the show, for a surprise show. Y'all stay tuned for that. But I, of course, am always your fearless leader, your host, Nathan Passwell. Follow me on TikTok, Twitter, all that good stuff. Like and subscribe, everything. We are doing today the tight end draft or pass show. I'm going to take a sip of this instead of awkwardly holding it. Got my Fantasy Daily coffee cup. You know how it goes. Here we go. Product placement. Anyway, so we are covering tight ends this morning. We are talking about the ones who are kind of in that ADP material like we've been talking about. If you guys haven't seen the quarterback, wide receiver, running back, draft or pass shows, those are really good shows. Go ahead and check those out. Those are on YouTube. Scroll down if you're on YouTube. They should be right there. But this is the tight end draft or pass show, and if you haven't heard us talk about them before, what we do is we basically take tight ends from their draft ADP and say, are you worth the price here? So formerly the undraftable show, where we would say, not drafting that person, too rich for my blood, or I'm just completely out on that player for the year because of their draft price mixed with, you know, however they may be operating and however they may, you know, finish the season, what their outlook is. So this is that version of the show, but geared towards tight ends. So today we are going to be talking about, I believe it is 6 tight ends, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes, we are talking about 6 tight ends today and where I believe they should land in drafts, where you should be drafting them, and how I feel on them going forward. So, without further ado, let us roll right on into the first name that we're going to talk about. And now this is a big name that we talked about a lot last year, and that is Atlanta Falcons tight end, number 1 pick, or first round pick last year by the Atlanta Falcons, Kyle Pitts. Now, Kyle Pitts is currently being drafted at the 28th position, which is the 3rd round. That is a high draft price for somebody like Kyle Pitts. Now, when you look at the tight ends going before him, okay, you have Travis Kelce, you have Mark Andrews. They're going in the 2nd round, which is extremely high as well. But I understand the draft construction price of saying, okay, I'm going to pay up for a Mark Andrews or a Travis Kelce because of the impact that they give you at a certain position that is an absolute commodity. So tight end being the commodity that it is inside of fantasy football, you really only have 6 to 7 tight ends that you can rely on. So the drop from each tier of tight end is absolutely massive. So drafting Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews at those positions, I preferably usually go running back, wide receiver, and I usually won't take tight end. I really have to be at the other end of the draft. Maybe if you're in a 12-man draft and you have the 2nd pick, that's when I'm kind of considering, okay, I'll take a Travis Kelce here because I can, you know, roll, or a Mark Andrews here because I can roll over, and my first 3 picks can be running back, wide receiver, tight end, or something like that in that combination. And if I have that combination, which is, you know, preferred when you're at that position, you have a really, really solid team structure going forward, and now you can maybe draft a running back in the 4th and then just stack wide receivers for a little bit, pick up somebody in the 9th like Rashad Penny, and have a really, really, really good draft structure going into the season. So it all depends on what you really lean for and what you hope for. Me personally, I'm running back and wide receiver heavy usually in drafts. But if Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews are sitting there and you really like the appeal of them on your team compared to the other running backs or wide receivers sitting there right there, then I absolutely would. I know that Mike Evans is a big name in between those guys right now, where a lot of people are passing on Mike Evans to get a Travis Kelce and a Mark Andrews. That I could understand. So I had a couple conversations with people about tight ends and drafting Kelce and Mark Andrews that high, and saying, you know, but I'm letting go of somebody like Mike Evans, or I'm letting go of somebody like James Conner. As much as I love Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, James Conner, those names this year, I definitely do think that you should be taking Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews because you can get somebody else a little bit later on. Maybe you're at that turn and you can skip on Zeke and you can get James Conner or some combination of that, and, you know, start off with 2 running backs, the tight end and a wide receiver, something like that. So if you are in that position and Kelce and Andrews fall to you, as much as I do say I don't want to overdraft tight end, I think they are the 2 exceptions when it comes to that rule, that when you're there, you're going to get the guaranteed consistency, especially with Tyreek Hill leaving Kansas City, Marquise Brown leaving the Ravens. I really do believe that both of those tight ends are going to be huge superstars this year. Obviously, they already have been, but I do expect them to keep it rolling. So you can draft them that high. Those are receivers. It is a points per reception league, so they're basically wide receivers, except you're putting them into a position that is very difficult to fill, whereas wide receiver is much easier to fill. So if you're at that spot, I definitely do believe that you should take them. If you're drafting Travis Kelce over somebody like CeeDee Lamb, do not do that. I've seen that a lot where people at the, if you're in a 12-man draft, the person on the back end takes like a CeeDee Lamb and then Travis Kelce and skips out on the running backs. I absolutely do not recommend doing that. I recommend that you get those 2 top-end wide receivers, or you get that running back wide receiver, whatever it may be. So let us move on right back into Kyle Pitts. He is currently going at the ADP 28, which is the 3rd round, which means you could be foregoing players like Mike Evans, A.J. Brown, Keenan Allen, Ezekiel Elliott, James Conner, or Patrick Mahomes is in that area as well, but I'm not drafting Patrick Mahomes with a 3rd round pick. That is absolutely absurd. So Kyle Pitts, he has 1 year of experience and also 1 touchdown under his belt, and that really is what kind of hurts the idea of wanting somebody like Kyle Pitts on my fantasy team. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Kyle Pitts. His talent, it's obviously there. It's just the team structure of Atlanta. Now, this year could be the breakout year for Kyle Pitts. We said last year, during the draft time and everything, that this is not going to be the breakout year for Kyle Pitts. The stars aren't aligning for him, and it just could not be that year. So take the victory lap on saying you didn't draft Kyle Pitts last year, but this could be it this year. And I do believe that this is going to be a breakout, some sort of breakout season for Kyle Pitts. I don't believe that he's going to finish next to Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. I still think he's going to fall into that tier 2 realm, but I do believe we start to see the touchdowns coming this year. Now, Kyle Pitts had 1,000 yards receiving last year. I don't remember how many catches he had. He had 130 targets, and I believe that is a 68 on the catches, but 130 targets, they're going to keep coming this year, regardless of who the quarterback is. I believe it'll be Marcus Mariota, but I think Desmond Ridder could get there eventually, and he could get the start. But regardless, I do believe that Kyle Pitts is still going to get a massive amount of targets. The way he's talented, the way that he plays, he's going to demand targets. So I do believe that they will be there, and I believe he's going to have a monster amount of targets, maybe in the 160 area. And if he does, he's getting wide receiver targets, and those touchdowns are going to come. So if the Falcons can get it together, if they can start getting into the red zone, if they can start making their offense look competent, then Kyle Pitts should start to return some value on who he is, and he should start getting those touchdowns. Now, with that being said, you're still in the 3rd round of a draft, and I do not believe that even with the big numbers on yards and some touchdowns coming his way, because say he had 1 last year, let's put him at 6 this year. That still doesn't put him anywhere close to what Mike Evans and Keenan Allen can bring you on your team. So if Mike Evans and Keenan Allen are both gone and you're staring at Kyle Pitts and Zeke and James Conner are still on the board, it's really hard for me to take Kyle Pitts there because I'm going to keep building my wide receiver and running back structure over the player. According to the players that I am much, much, much more confident in. I would much rather have a Zeke or a James Conner over Kyle Pitts, and I would be much more comfortable and confident coming out of my draft if I were to have both of those players or either one of those players in comparison to a tight end like Kyle Pitts. Because if I can wait on tight end and get somebody later on, I'm going to feel just as good as when I got Kyle Pitts, because those players could bring me touchdowns. They could bring me 800 yards, and it's not the same as the 1,300 yards that Kyle Pitts is capable of. But the touchdowns are there, the receptions are there, and I have in my wide receiver column, my running back column, my stats being bumped up because of how much more dominant and consistent those guys are. So I'm not praying for any points from a tight end that I drafted in the 3rd. I'm confident in the points that I will receive from a running back or a wide receiver that I took over there in the 3rd. So when I draft a tight end, it's not this early, and it needs to be guaranteed team consistency, guaranteed structure when it comes from a 3rd or a 4th round pick. So those first 4 picks are extremely valuable for me, and I will not waste them on somebody like Kyle Pitts, who could blow up my face. Now, don't get me wrong, he could finish the season as the tight end too. He has that potential. I just do not trust the offense, and I'm not willing to take that on an unproven player like that right now. I mean, he's proven on talent, but the offense really holds him back, so it is unproven a little bit. Sip time. Get that brand placement in there. All right, George Kittle, moving on to San Francisco's beast of a man, George Kittle. Now, don't get me wrong, his draft price is pretty sweet. I'm not going to lie, his draft price at 37 is pretty sweet for somebody like George Kittle. 37 is currently 4th round, beginning of the 4th round. So let's see, you go 1, 2, 3. So this is the back end. This is the double stack on the back of the 4th round coming back up. So it is a good spot if you're in a wide receiver, 2 wide receiver, 2 running back league. It is a good spot if you're on the back end for you to start looking at tight end. The only problem is there's still stud running backs around him. People like David Montgomery, Upside Heaven, and Cam Akers. So as much as I do love George Kittle, I do think that the injury risk is there. Now let's take a little trip down memory lane back a couple years ago where I completely wrote off George Kittle, and I believe it was in like 2018, 2019 where I said I'm done with him. He was on the Undraftable show. I said I can't do this anymore. I threw him out completely. I said I wanted nothing to do with him because of the injury concern. Is he going to be on the field? Is he not going to be on the field? He's taking up spot on my roster, and I was just out on it. Tight end is such a commodity that I cannot hang on to somebody like that for him to, maybe play whenever he can. So I completely threw him out. Now going into 2022, right? So going into 2021, I completely threw him out. And I felt good about that for basically, the first half of the season, a couple games in there, he had his games. And like I said, when those guys have their games after I throw them out, I don't care because how long did you have to wait to get that game? And were you even confident putting him in your lineup? Or did you have you already pivoted to somebody else and now you have to make the juggle of am I going to start this player, am I going to start this player? So obviously you put George Kittle in most of the time. If you had him, you should be starting him if he's starting and he's healthy. And he had those big blow-up games. He has great potential to have absolutely massive blow-up games. But like I said, for me, consistency is king. So when I'm looking at a player who can have those big blow-up games, but he's only doing them 2-3 times a year, and then you go back in the stats and you're like, oh, wow, he finished 6th on the year. Well, yeah, because nobody else was doing 30, 40, 50-point games, and he's blowing up. But the difference is those other players were giving me 10, 12, 15, then a 20, 10, 12, 15, then a 20. And that consistency I would rather have than a player who's on my bench then all of a sudden does 35 and wins me 1 week. That 1 week is not going to do me any good when I'm losing 4 in a row because I don't have a tight end. So consistency is key for me. But with that being said, going into 2022, the extreme likelihood that Trey Lance becomes the starter. I do think if Trey Lance becomes the starter, when Trey Lance becomes the starter, when we're done playing this merry-go-round of is it Jimmy G or is it Trey Lance? It's Trey Lance. Kyle Shanahan wants it to be Trey Lance. If you go back and you look at some of Trey Lance stats, he looks amazing. As soon as he gets on the field, he's going to be absolutely dominant, and I do believe that he's going to hyper-target George Kittle and Deebo Samuel. So as soon as Trey Lance gets on that field, or maybe if it's a Brandon Ayuk, I've seen a lot of rapport coming out of camps with Brandon Ayuk and Trey Lance having some connection. But I believe that Trey Lance is going to have 1 or 2 people that he goes to like crazy. He's not going to be somebody who spreads the ball around a lot. He's going to run the ball a lot, and I do believe that there's going to be 2 specific, whenever it may be. I believe that Kittle will be a default one, but between Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, he's going to hyper-target the crap out of one of them. So I do believe that he becomes the starter. My concern is how many games will Kittle make it through if he's being hyper-targeted like that. So the last 3 years, he played 14 games, 8 games, 14 games, and he finished at the tight end 4 for tight end. If he's active, you start him. But he's like Gronk. So it's hard. If you have him, you start him, you play him just like Gronk. But for me personally, much like Kyle Pitts, this is the area in which he's being drafted is just red alert risk for me. If I'm drafting a tight end at this ADP, my team structure, I have to draft somebody like Darren Waller over George Kittle. I would much rather have Darren Waller than George Kittle this year, and even though they're going back-to-back in drafts, I'm willing to wait and let one of them go and then wait till the end of the draft and see what I have there in my later end guys. So if you're very, very confident in your first 3 picks and you're at round 4 and you have the chance to draft George Kittle, I would entertain it, but I'd be very, very, very positive that you have what you want when you're taking somebody like George Kittle, because he is not going to play 17 games. Or 16 games. It's not going to happen. And even the 14 last year, if you go back and look at his games logs for those 14, it was not great every single week. He has a 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 1 point, 4 point, 4.7, 8, 3, like 2.3. These are just, so those are the games that he played where you're talking about where you're saying, okay, but he played 14 games. Yes, but you're playing a merry-go-round of if he will do it or not. So me personally, I'm out on George Kittle when it comes to his ADP. I'm not willing to trust him. I still have a little bit of the hurt feelings from every time he burned me before. And, And George Kittle was one of those players that I grabbed before he actually became, really big. So I wanted him to do well, and then he just hurt my feelings too many times. I think he's going to do it again. He's going to have great games, but for the draft capital, the draft price that you're paying at the 4th round, too rich for my blood, and I'm not willing to go grab him. With the way that Trey Lance is going to play, he's going to be effective, but with the way that Kittle plays, he's probably going to hurt himself again. So it's tough for me to want to keep George Kittle on my team. Just like Gronk, he's a big dumb kid, and we love him to death, but he's a big dumb kid, and he's going to give you a lot of hurt feelings if you're really counting on him to be somebody that you need, going throughout the year. And tight end is a super hot commodity. Don't clog it up with somebody by waiting for them. I've seen a lot of players make it towards the end and they don't have a tight end, or they don't have certain positions that they need that, strong structure, and they're still waiting on it. They're still hoping on it. So all the people who held on to Christian McCaffrey last year, waiting on it, hoping on it, it's kind of the same deal. You got to be able to let go. You got to be able to stay like water, man. Always changing. So George Kittle, it's a pass for me. Moving on to one of my favorite tight ends of the season. One of the players you're going to hear me talk about a lot, and that is Dallas Cowboys, Dalton Schultz. Now, everybody, Dalton Schultz last year, where do you think he finished? I just want you to say a number. Where do you think Dalton Schultz finished last year in PPR? Out in your head, I'll just give you a second. Now, if you don't know, Dalton Schultz finished the year in standard and PPR as the tight end 3. And he is going currently at 59, which is the back end of the 5th. Now, he's currently going at ADP 59, which is the back end of the 5th, but he is one of those players that is constantly bounced around in drafts. So whenever I do a mock draft, I see Dalton Schultz bounce to the 6th, back up to the 5th, sometimes fall to the 7th, because everybody who overdrafted at the beginning, tight ends, quarterbacks, something like that, now they're taking a ton of wide receivers, a ton of running back. But what's great is you watch Fantasy Daily. So you're already with your running back, your wide receivers. You got a whole plethora stack of running back and wide receivers that you feel really good about. And now you're going for tremendous upside with great consistency. And that is Dalton Schultz in the 6th round. So the 6th round, we talked a lot about it on the wide receiver show. You're going to be bouncing around a lot there. So if you can actually say, okay, I like all these wide receivers in round 6, you're in round 5, you have a running back, a wide receiver, a running back, and maybe another wide receiver. And you got 2-2, and you can go ahead and say, okay, I'm in the 5th round. I'm going to take somebody like Dalton Schultz at tight end, and then I can roll around to the 6th round and get somebody like, Juju or whoever we were talking about. John's big on Juju, I'm not. So whoever we were talking about on the wide receiver show, there's a ton of wide receivers in the 6th round that I'm all about. So if you could do that, Dolan Schultz is probably one of my favorite players this year for tight end, and I think he is in this perfect spot to be drafted. Now, when we talked about Schultz on the franchise tag show, there was excitement because I thought Schultz would get a lot of nods, and Blake Jarwin would slot in as needed. He'd be more of a blocker for Dallas, but Dalton Schultz was going to be the lead receiver guy when they needed a tight end to receive. Well, Blake Jarwin failed the physical and he was cut from the team. So as a result, Dalton Schultz he already got the franchise tag, but now he's going to definitely play the rest of the season out on the franchise tag, and he will be playing for his 2023 contract. Now, obviously, players aren't excited about that, but you are playing for your next year's contract. So Dalton Schultz, lot to prove this year. Dallas wants big things for him. If he's on the franchise tag, they're going to use him quite a bit, and I think Schultz is the next man up for breakout potential. Amari Cooper targets. He's gone. They got to go somewhere. The perceived wide receiver 3, James Washington, he's out for a while. Cedric Wilson, he went to Miami. A lot of vacated targets on this offense. They might have Pollard move to the slot, but that's hearsay so far. But if you're moving a running back to slot, it means you don't have a ton of skill players that you're confident in outside of CeeDee Lamb. So me personally, I think that Dalton Schultz is absolutely going to tear it up this year. All systems go for Schultz to be his breakout year. He is definitely one of my favorite tight end targets at his ADP. He's being drafted with like a bunch of wide receivers and such in the 7th round, but this is where I'm willing to spend up for somebody I believe in. A blown 7th round pick is not going to hurt you like a blown 3rd round pick in Kyle Pitts or something like that. So Super consistency out of Dalton Schultz. I do believe that he is going to stay in the 5th, 6th round area, but he is going to fall in a lot of different leagues, especially your home leagues, to like the 7th. And if you can build, and you see that people are reaching up for tight end and Dalton Schultz keeps falling, let him keep falling, but keep an eye on it and see if you can snag him, because I do believe that Dolan Schultz and Dak this year are going to be a thing. I'm very excited for it, and I think that Dalton Schultz is going to make a lot of people happy, and maybe even, I might be going too far, win some Fantasy People Championships. So, big fan of Dolan Schultz this year, and tight end 3, man. He finished tight end 3 and nobody's talking about it except for us here. And that's why you, tuning into Fantasy Daily, are going to be champions with me at the end of the season. Me and John, we're going to share a championship, I guess. To the Arizona tight end, Mr. Zach Ertz. They give him the 3-year deal. They're saying he's our guy and we are going to roll with him going forward. Zach Ertz going in the 7th round, right? I believe so, at 87. Yes, he's going at 87, which is in the 8th round, which is a sweet price. You got players like Tony Pollard, Treylon Burks, Hunter Renfrow, Elijah Moore, and Devin Singletary going around him. So Zach Ertz is one of those names that I believe when you're looking around, he is one of those names that kind of blends in, and you're not really looking for a tight end. But I believe that if you have, kind of been going through picks and you're moving through stuff and you don't realize, oh crap, I didn't grab a tight end, and you're in round 8, Zach Ertz is a value, man. So where did you finish last year? Oh yeah, top 5? Oh, hey there, top 5 tight end. I see you returning some value. Okay, I see you. So Zach Ertz going way too low in drafts, and it's an absolute beauty to get him as late as he is in that draft at 8th round. There will be down games, but I do see Ertz in this offense. Finally he gets the full year in his offense. He gets the 3-year deal. They give him the confidence to say, okay, you're the guy. He's not bouncing around. He's not hiding behind Dallas Goedert. So this is kind of a revitalization for Zach Ertz, and I do believe that especially in the 8th round, for you to get a player like Zach Ertz when he's surrounded with players like Hunter Renfrow, Elijah Moore, Devin Singletary, Zach Ertz could start off the season as Kyler Murray's number 1 target. I do believe it'll be Rondale Moore, but with Marquise Brown getting arrested yesterday, DeAndre Hopkins suspension, Zach Ertz could be extremely heavily targeted, and he could be the tight end 1 for the first few weeks going into the season. He could be probably the most dominant tight end for a good stretch of the season, just due to the fact that there's nobody else there to throw to. And Kyler Murray's a beast. Zach Ertz is kind of getting his revitalization. He's going to get in the end zone. He's going to catch those targets coming to him. So I expect the targets to go way up. I expect the utilization to go up. And for Zach Ertz to be taken in the 8th round, absolutely steal right now. All right, we got 2 tight ends left to talk about. We are talking about Mr. Mike G. Now, Mike G for the Miami Dolphins is another player going far later than he should, and I am really excited about his potential this year. All the right hype that has surrounded Hill and Waddle and the Dolphins, the energy there for this team, it's going to have an offensive impact. They're going to be a productive offense. Whether or not the defense can win them games, they're going to be a productive offense. So if you're looking at somebody like Mike Gesicki, and if you want to manipulate a defense, you get speed on the outside in Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. That speed on the outside is really going to affect how the defense responds to that offense. And I'm sorry, you had Tyreek Hill. I'm not trying to make the comparison, but if you had Tyreek Hill in Kansas City, Travis Kelce benefited off of that a little bit by the defense backing up. So I do believe that Mike Gesicki is going to get some of that benefit of the doubt, where he is going to kind of have a lot of inside targets. I believe that he's probably going to run the inside of that field, especially off the 5'10" mark. And if we want to talk about how Tua might have problems throwing downfield, he's going to take those. He's going to take all right, I'm just going to throw it 5-10 yards to Mike Gesicki and let him get the yak yards and see what happens. So the whole landscape of the defense changes. So I'm not saying that Mike G will be Kelce, but I think some of the benefits outside of the speed on Miami will leave the inside completely open for Mike G, and he could be an absolute red zone beast and a possession beast. So draft him all day for where he's going. He's currently going at 106, which is the 9th round. That's insane for somebody who could have return value almost immediately. So Mike G is my last player that I want to talk about, my last tight end that I really want to talk about, because I believe where he is going, he can return tight end 1 value, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about Mike G in the top 5, top 6 at the end of the year. So Mike G going in the 9th round, wicked underrated, and I do believe that he has some potential to kind of take over at Travis Kelce this role this year, where he just beats everybody out. He's only fighting with the free safety over the middle or with the slot receiver, wherever he is. Yeah, I think Mike G is going to have a big year. So that's it for the tight ends that I wanted to talk about. I do want to throw in a bonus one. It's more of a bonus ad if you get absolutely hosed on tight end in the draft, and if you're mid-draft and you're starting to look at this wasteland of players and you think, I didn't grab a tight end. I know what I'm doing. I feel good on my running backs and wide receivers, but now I have to grab a flyer. I really don't know who to grab. Well, I believe that at 126, which is in the 11th round, if you've completely whiffed, I do believe by the 11th round, probably by the 10th round latest, you need your tight end. You need to get somebody that you feel good in, you can have them on your team, and you're not just grabbing a bench rider or a streamer guy, so you can't play the waiver all year. But I do believe that Hunter Henry, outside of where he is going, because he is currently going at pick 126. Now, 126 is in the 11th round, so this is 2 rounds later than I believe what you should be getting players for. Where you should be drafting your tight end, you should have them by then. But if you just get lost in the draft, you get completely hosed on tight end, you don't know who to pick, I do believe that Hunter Henry at 126 can be a great pick for a bottom barrel guy. Now, Josh McDaniels leaving the offense. Mac Jones had a rapport last year with Hunter Henry. Jonnu Smith is clearly the blocker in New England at tight end. But I believe that Bill Belichick, now that he's probably going to run the offense, they haven't had a defensive coordinator. It's probably going to all be in Bill Belichick's hands, basically. He's going to be running the whole show. And I expect them to play much more of a possession game. Let the defense do the work. Keep the ball in our hands. Don't do any turnovers. So they're going to run the ball a lot, and I believe that Hunter Henry is probably going to see a ton of targets and has the chance of seeing a ton of targets. So I'm not saying draft up, get Hunter Henry, he's going to be great. I'm saying that the chance of him being, a 130 target person is within the realm of possibilities because of how much Bill Belichick likes playing possession football. So I don't think you're going to see Mac Jones air out a lot this year. I think you're going to see a lot of outside post stuff like that, some bench stuff like that, but I don't think you're going to see a ton of streak, up the middle post, stuff like that from Mac Jones. I think it's going to be very possessive football. Keep the ball in our hands, get in the end zone, give the defense their shot out there. So Hunter Henry, I think he is a good snag. So everybody, August 4th, thank you so much for joining me again here on Fantasy Daily. That is the Tight End Drafter Pass Show. Quarterback, wide receiver, and running back up as well. And if you made it to the show, I'll even let you in on this little surprise of what tomorrow's episode is, and that is the mock draft episode. So all this stuff we've been talking about, would you draft him? Is he worth it? Blah, 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 blah. Me and John are going to do a mock draft live here on the episode. John will be back to give you his quarterback and tight end points that he didn't get to make on the show. Tell me if I'm crazy telling people to start and whatnot. But besides that, everybody, thank you so much for joining me again today. It is morning time right now, so make sure you drink plenty of water today. Stay out of that sun. Get home, get some rest, go to bed on time, all that good stuff. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Take care.